Hello, hello. So, I think we all love a good fight scene, and the smoother it is, the bigger the impact, right? Well, not necessarily. There are a lot of things that give a fight scene this special feeling where you literally get goosebumps. Once again, we can't ignore storytelling. A fight always has to be the result of your story in order to be more than just a fight. Let me give you two examples. First, we have God of High School, an anime that has some of the best fight animations that I have ever seen. Really otherworldly stuff. And while the movements alone are awe-inspiring, there is no deeper meaning to many of the fights in the series. And the main character reflects that. He just fights cause he likes to. In itself there's nothing wrong with that, but in the context of the bigger story, which also doesn't give a lot, it cheapens the fights to mere eye candies when they could be so much more. The other example is My Hero Academia, an anime that most of you probably know. In this anime there are many fights that I could show you, but ultimately I decided for the fight Deku vs Muscular, because while the whole fight is pretty much just a couple punches, the story behind it makes it as epic as it gets. So the whole story behind the fight begins episodes earlier when Deku, our main character which desperately wants to be a hero, meets Kota, a small boy that seems to hate heroes with all his heart, and he's showing it. But later we find out that his parents were actually heroes and they died on the job, so that's explaining it. Fast forwarding, there are some bad guys coming to hurt our heroes, and Deku is going on a one-man mission to find this boy and bring him back safely. Deku has no problems finding him. The only problem is the bad guy also hasn't. So here he is, standing in front of this monster, which turns out is the killer of the boy's parents. If we look at this scene from a storytelling perspective only, these two characters, Kota and Muscular, are nothing more than tools to show a battle that is actually raging in our main character's heart. What is the meaning of being a hero? Aren't good intentions a way weaker motivation than the brutal, animal-like killing lust of those psychopaths? And is he serious about this whole hero thing, or is it just a childish fantasy he's trying to live out? In his greatest moment of struggle, when he's ready to give up and he lets loose of being a hero and just becomes another teenager, he even says goodbye to his mother. But then, Kota literally wakes him up with a cold shower. This is the moment when he realizes why he's wanted to do it all along. The spirit of self-sacrifice reawakens, his resolve strengthens, and the fight is ending. As you can see in this example, in a story you want to use external obstacles as ways to show internal struggle, and a fight usually is the moment those struggles are resolved. That's why they give this immense feeling of accomplishment. That, and also because the stakes are high. In a fight, you can lose everything. From a limb to your life, to the life of a loved one. Except if you're living in the Dragon Ball universe, then the most you lose are 3 episodes of screen time, but whatever. Now that we've talked about the story part of it, we of course have to talk about animation. In my last video, I talked about this blurry whoosh effect. I don't know how to call it. As I said there, you can use that effect whenever you want to show really fast movement, and it's especially good for us lone animator wolves, because you don't have to draw that much detail. And not that many different pictures, plus it looks really cool, so it's a win-win-win. What you basically do is you take the colors of your subject and you mash and blur them together. Especially important is that you do it in the direction of the movement. It's pretty easy when you get used to it, but one thing to look out is, don't just literally take the colors and put them there one by one. Really blur them, get some shades in there. And if you ask yourself why I'm stating the obvious, it's because I made that mistake and it looked awful, so I'm watching out for you. Another thing about fight scene animation is the fluidity and elasticity of your drawn objects. The best way to explain it is the way old cartoons were drawn, where the bodies of those characters were deformed and distorted to give, let's say, the impact of a hammer more oomph. The same way, you can distort your characters, but maybe just a little less in order to not make it look comical. The best example for this phenomenon is the fight between Naruto and Sasuke. In Japan, this style of animation that is especially smooth and especially well drawn is called sakuga, and is mostly used in the most important moments of the story, which usually are the fights. So how do you get to this level of smoothness? Do you draw everything on once, meaning using 24 frames per second, as the great movie Akira was? No, you don't, and against the myth, Akira was not drawn solely on once. Because of the big budget, 24 frames per second were seen quite often, but still, there are a lot of 2s, and even some 3s and 4s. So the real art is using the right frame rate at the right time and having a great sense for movement. Cause if you want it to look as smooth as the best of Japanese sakuga, you have to do it right when you draw it as well. Changing the frame rates can sometimes fix problems, but not always. So what are my tips for beginners? Well, exercise your drawing skills, but that is a boring tip. I would say a lot of the time you can get away with using this whoosh effect that I talked about, but just don't overdo it, else it looks like you recorded your anime with a camcorder from the 90s. The rest of the time, just try your best with the skills you have and fix it via frame rates. And if you find time on the side, exercise drawing different poses from different angles of your characters. That's giving you the feel for movement that you really need. Another quick tip for fight scenes is the music. Instead of just using aggressive music or using whatever you use as your theme song, try to watch out for what the fight is all about and what the main emotion of it is. Then, depending on the meaning, you can use a hopeful song, or a regretful one, or a proud one, or whatever. Just go a step beyond people are fighting, let's use rock. So this is pretty much it for my tips for a good fight scene. If you want to see more of making anime on your own, stay notified and we'll meet again when we get great together.